Hello and welcome back to my Wizarding World and Minecraft series. Last episode, we built the 3 tasks from the Triwizard Tournament. You can check that video out next. And this time we're going to be building Godric's Hollow. So let's get right into it. For the people who don't know what Godric's Hollow is a small village in the series. Some people of note who used to live here were the Dumbledores, Bathilda Bagshot, Godric Gryffindor, and most famously, the Potters. The town is the site at which Harry Potter's parents were murdered by Voldemort, which set off the events of the series. I will explain a little bit more lore throughout the video, but that's the basics for right now. In starting this project, I took a long look at the opening scene. In the books and movies, Hermione and Harry visit Godric's Hollow in hopes of finding Bathilda Bagshot, hoping she has information about the Sword of Gryffindor, as well as to see Harry's parents' graves. In the filming of Godric's Hollow, they based the architecture off of a place called Lavenham. It's a village in England. It's got a lot of these little nice style homes that they then mimicked on the set of Harry Potter. There's actually a photo online of the construction of the houses we see on the main road. This set was built at Pinewood Studios, Warner Bros. Lot. In examining this opening shot, you can see the houses on the right, the houses on the left, a few of the graves, and then the house way in the back. To start this build, I roughly estimate out the street. You can also see this curve at the end of it, which I implemented here. I started with the houses on the right. As you can see, this isn't the best angle of them, but we get a little bit of a better shot here where we can see this area that the buildings don't align with, which you can't see in the opening shot. Next, we see how Harry and Hermione look to the right and see the church and the graveyard. Obviously now we know where the graveyard is, and so I started building from there. Here we see what the books describe as a kissing gate. Line this gate up with this angle, we can now start building the graves in the graveyard. After placing down a few graves, I also had to build this tree. We see it behind Hermione when she's looking at Ignotus Peveril's grave. Ignotus Peveril was one of the most important people who actually ended up living in Godric's Hollow. He's one of the 3 brothers from the Tale of the 3 Brothers in the Deathly Hallows books, and he's also the one who passed down his family tree Harry's invisibility cloak, meaning, as we find out in the series, Harry is related to Ignotus Peveril. In the same shot is one of the better looks we have at the church, and that's not saying much. All we've got is this, and this with Bathilda Bagshot. After doing some digging, I found this photo online, and I have no clue where they got it because they built a set for this church, but it gives me a great view of the whole church and also the graves next to it, which are very important. So just to give you a quick look at the church, this is how I mimicked the church: the snowy sloped roofs, the windows, and the tower coming up the top. This wasn't too hard to build once I had the photo. One of the last things I had to do with this section where Lily and James's grave was. As we see in this clip, Hermione looks to her left and backwards, and we see Harry looking down at the grave. Also in this photo, we see this taller grave next to it. We know this is the same grave because of this black grave also next to it. Looking at another shot of the grave, here's the black grave, and then there's the bigger one right next to it. And going all the way back to that church shot once more, we see the black grave in the little corner and the tall grave right next to it. This means we know the exact location of the church. This would be a little bit confusing because if we look back at the shot of Harry looking at his graves, there is really no church where it should be. Possibly this grave on the far left is supposed to be this grave, but when you look at the distance, it really doesn't make a lot of sense, so I'm not sure how they filmed this, and maybe it's just the shot at which this angle is taken from. But yeah, that's how I placed it. Lastly, finish with placing a few trees behind the way. The next thing we see is Bathilda Bagshot. I'll be moving on to her part near the end of this video, but for now we'll follow her so we can figure out where the next part of Godric's Hollow is. Weirdly, we start seeing her turn right. Now, it kind of looks like she's going at the bench, and as we see from that photo earlier, there's nothing to walk to. And the next time we see her is she's walking down this street. Now, many people would say, oh, the street's behind that church. But we know it's not because of this shot of Harry and Hermione following. We see the same lamp from earlier, we see the same houses and wall from earlier on the far left. And one of the other things we see is the Christmas Eve lights behind Harry's head, which we also see in that opening shot from this building. So we know that's the street that they started on, and they're walking right. Right away, Harry's eye catches something, and it's his old home, meaning now we know where the Potter's house is. Looking at this photo of when they're showing the house, we see this little gap in between two buildings, and then we also see that shot from the other direction, and you can also see this gap again. So this is where I added the gap for myself. In looking at Harry's home, it is different from the Godric's Hollow we see in the first film with Voldemort outside of it. They ended up changing this just because the movie was made 10 years prior. But what I find interesting is how in Deathly Hallows Part 2, we see in Snape's flashback him looking at the Godric's Hollow house. Now, just a little fact from the books, Snape actually never goes to Godric's Hollow after Lily and James die, so it is quite weird that Snape is there holding Lily. Again, that's never said in the books, but it does make for the emotional moment, so I guess I won't complain. But back to what I find weird is that Snape would be outside of this house after Lily and James have died and Voldemort's now gone, and it was said that it destroyed a lot of the house. Now, as we see the roof a little bit destroyed, and that wouldn't be a problem if in Deathly Hallows Part 1, where we are now, that the whole roof is gone and the whole second floor is just almost wiped out. Now, this would have been around 18 years later, but it seems really weird that this house would have lost a lot of its roof and second floor without that being part of the explosion. So I don't know if it's a continuity error or what, but I built the Godric's Hollow we see in Deathly Hallows Part 1. Before we move on, I want to show you a few things that were only mentioned in the books. It was said that there was a statue in the center of the village square. This statue displayed a war memorial for any muggle that would come across it. But after a closer look by wizards, it would transform into James and Lily with baby Harry, a monument memorializing their sacrifice 18 years prior. I built this statue, doing my best to create both a war memorial and people on a few blocks of space. I used command blocks to make it so when you get within a 6 blocks radius of the statue, it turns into the Potters, and I think it works really nicely. Another thing that was said in the books is that there was a pub. I got inspiration from this old-timey pub I found on Google, and so I quickly built that here. The last book-centered thing I built was this post office. I looked up the post office in Lavenham and recreated it here, trying to get the most inspiration I can out of the real-life town. Moving on, back to Bathilda Bagshot. We saw earlier her walking down the street, and then we also get a little other shot of the street when we're looking at her once again. That first shot gives me a really great view of the right houses, so I built them here. And the closer shot gives me another view of the left houses, and so again, I built those. I'm kind of glossing over the process of building these. They kind of take like an hour or two, but they're also kind of unimportant, so you just see them here. You're welcome. We can guarantee where the Potter's house is because when we're looking at Bathilda from behind, we see that kissing gate once again. Just trying to link everything together for you. One last thing before I show you Bathilda's home. Let me just tell you a little about her in case you didn't know. Bathilda Bagshot is the witch historian who wrote the important book History of Magic. We later find out that she died and her corpse was being possessed by Voldemort, so Nagini, which is Voldemort's snake, could pretend to be her. This led to the creepy snake scene that I gladly skip every time. Sadly, when building her home, I had to rewatch the scene more times than I would have liked to. But Bathilda Bagshot is mainly mentioned throughout the series, and this is the only time we ever see her. So in building her home, I first had to find out the location. Now the only thing we know is that she's walking down this street as seen before, and the last shot of the house is the top upper window. Based on this, I tried guessing where it would be, and so I just put it as this house right here. Now for the interior. I first used this shot. In the mirror, we can see a window. This is where most of the light is also coming from in these beginning shots, and so I lined up this window here. That mirror is on top of like a shelf area, so I also built that. I also had the picture of Gellert Grindelwald and the candle. Just to stay on this bottom floor, when Bathilda and Harry are walking away, we see this hallway behind them. We later see Hermione walking through it, picking up books of Rita Skeeter's biography on Albus Dumbledore. A little bit later, we see Hermione make the realization and start running back. Here we see the opposite side of the hallway, so I could fill in the rest. Moving upstairs, we see Harry start walking up these stairs, and then we see the top of it. I copied that here. Bathilda starts walking to the right down this hallway into the next room. We also know this because Harry gets to the top of the stairs and looks left. We see from Harry's point of view him walking into the next room. And as he's looking through photos of Dumbledore and his family, we see Bathilda transforming behind him. Quick window on the right, too. Here's where I had to go almost frame by frame to see what was really happening. Right when Bathilda's transforming, we see a little bookcase on the left and a chair on the right. Harry grabs the stool that was right here when he was walking into the room. In this wide shot, we can see a little bit of the other corner of the room. So again, the left was that desk he was looking at the photos earlier. On the right is another desk where the stool was, and the wall behind him is where he's about to be flung through. Just a little context before we move on. I need to mention how Daniel Radcliffe's stunt double was injured in this scene. His stunt double, David Holmes, was seriously injured while rehearsing the scene in this home. During the scene, which involved the explosion of the wall, he was rigged to a harness that was meant to pull him backwards at a high speed, simulating the impact of the blast. However, something went wrong and he was slammed forcefully into the wall, resulting in a severe spinal injury that left him paralyzed from the chest down. David Holmes has since become an advocate for spinal injury awareness and who remains close friends with Radcliffe, who has supported him over the years. David recently wrote a book called The Boy Who Lived and also had a documentary made a year prior. Getting back to the scene, we now move into the really bright white room. This scene also often off-puts me like a lot, but at first we see this nice wide shot of this like baby room. Throughout Harry's fight with the snake, we see some more of this room, so I just filled it in as I could. Soon the snake jumps at Harry, and Hermione hits it with a spell, and it falls down the staircase that we saw earlier. We then see Harry and Hermione hide behind a bed, and from this wide shot, we get a great look at the room. Filling it in as I could, you see the window behind them, and that leads us into this next part where they run away. Because as you see, the snake jumps at them, they apparate, and the glass behind them gets destroyed. And showing some of this flyover, I built a few houses that I could copy and paste and change the color to fill in the rest of Godric's Hollow. So I built this pink house based off this image. I built this peach house based off of the corner of this image. I built this orangish house based off this image. And lastly, I built this little burnt brownish colored house, which I then changed the color of as this house right here. As said before, I copy and pasted it a little bit, filling in the areas. One more thing is that behind Bathilda Bagshot, you see this bridge, which means it goes over some water, so I built that. And just filling in anything I could to make Godric's Hollow come together. And that, ladies and gentlemen, gets us to the end of the video. Make sure to subscribe if you like this content, and I'll continue making it. Actually, I'll probably continue making it whether it does well or not, but you know, it's great if it does well. As mentioned earlier, make sure you check out how I built the 3 tasks in the Triwizard Tournament. I think I'm going to start making this a series, because as you know, I've built so many parts of the Wizarding World, and this just gives me more motivation to show you guys how I built it and the lore behind everything. Again, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, drop a comment. I would love for you guys to check out my edits. You can find them here on YouTube Shorts, or you could follow me on TikTok and Instagram, both under The Wizard Project. I also post daily trivia on Instagram if you want to check that out. And I also have tour videos of 2 parts of my Hogwarts castle, if that interests you as well. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in another video.